Good day, everyone. So it's great to have your presence here today. And at this time, we are going to have a fruitful discussion regarding one of the poem of Emily Dickinson entitled I Am Nobody, Who Are You? So, our job for today is to dissect this poem through knowing the background information of the author and also knowing the summary or message of the poem, and of course, knowing and analyzing the underlying elements present in the piece. So, this is going to be an interesting discussion since we do not know yet all the informations and ideas about it. So, as we are going to share our thoughts and different ideas, we're going, I mean, by the end of this activity, we're going to know more about this poem and ponder the greatness of the piece. So, are you all excited for this activity?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what are we waiting for? Let's start. So, let's start with knowing the author of the story, Emily Dickinson. So, who is familiar with Emily Dickinson?
Yes, Yubel, I have known a little background of Emily Dickinson, which in full name is Emily Elizabeth Dickinson, who was born on December 10, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, US. Died May 15, 1886 in Amherst. She is an American lyric poet who lived in seclusion and commanded a singular brilliance of style and integrity of vision. With Walt Whitman, Dickinson is widely considered to be one of the two leading 19th century American poets. Only 10 of Emily Dickinson's nearly 1,800 poems are known to have been published in her lifetime. Devoted to private pursuits, she sent hundreds of poems to friends and correspondents while apparently keeping the greater number to herself. She habitually worked in verse forms, suggestive of hymns and ballads, with lines of three or four stresses. Her unusual off rhymes have been seen as both experimental and influenced by the 18th century hymnist Isaac Watts. She freely ignored the usual rules of versification and even of grammar. And in the intellectual content of her work, she likewise proved exceptionally bold and original. Her verse is distinguished by its epigrammatic compression, haunting personal voice, enigmatic brilliance, and lack of high polish.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that information about Emily Dickinson. So, Emily Dickinson is one of America's greatest and most original poets of all time. She took definition as her province and challenged the existing definitions of poetry and the poet's work. Like writers such as Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Walt Whitman, she experimented with expression in order to free it from conventional restraints. Like writers such as Charlotte Bronte and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, she crafted a new type of persona for the first person. So, in knowing more about this poem, so we are going to answer a series of questions. So, here are the following questions. Oh, but before that, we are going to know, we are going to read the poem. So, I would give the honor to Gara to read the poem.
Thank you, Yovel. So, I am nobody. Who are you? I am nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's the pair of us. Don't tell that advertise, How dreary to be somebody. How public like a frog. To tell one's name, the livelong June, to an admiring bug.
Thank you so much, Gara. Now let's ponder the following questions. Okay, so here are the first two questions. So, question number one: what is the central theme being highlighted in the poem?
Good day, everyone. I am Luigi Gomez. And for the first question, I Am Nobody Who Are You is a short but powerful poem that questions the need for attention, seeking instead to highlight the virtues of anonymity and isolation. In essence, it is a poem in praise of quiet, individual contemplation, the kind represented by Dickinson and her poetry itself. Indeed, though they may never met, those individuals who choose to be nobodies over somebodies paradoxically form a subtle but powerful community.
And for me, one of the main theme is self-identity and like all that goes along with it. As individuals, by reflecting on the poem, we can question ourselves if are we content with our identities or are we content being nobody or somebody or a famous one, a popular one? Are we content with who are we?
So, for me, there are three themes that I have observed, which is isolation, privacy, and that identity that you have said early on, Lisa. So isolation because the persona seems isolated. This is observed in the poem that she is not used to people, and this is somewhat mirrors the people in isolation. The poem is an allegory to the kind of feeling they have. And privacy because she prefers to keep everything about herself and not publicize it. Then distinct identity because the feeling I have said early on which isolation and the kind of situation she wants to be shows her identity as a person, which is being an introvert individual.
So yes, I have agreed with them. So some of us, as we reach the middle adulthood stage, can relate to this. We all just want a time for ourselves, right? Just being a nobody, known by not everyone, less stress and drama, maintaining peace and sanity.
All right, so let's proceed to question number two. Describe the elements present in the poem. So I have figured out and I have um, observed some certain elements that are present in the poem. So number one is the rhyme. So we have known that rhyme is the repetition of syllables, right? So typically at the end of the verse line. So rhymed words conventionally share all sounds following the word's last stressed syllable. So we have known perfect and imperfect rhyme, internal and end rhyme. And here in this poem, end rhyme is observed. End rhyme is used to make the stanza melodious. For example, the words you to from the lines I am nobody, who are you? Are you nobody too? And guess the other end rhyme, guys. Who can guess the other end rhyme?
Another element present in the poem is stanza. So a stanza is a poetic form of some lines. And in our study of literature, we have encountered different kinds of stanza. We have like monostich, couplet, tercet, quatrain, quatrain, and back to the poem, we have observed that there are two stanzas in this poem with each comprised of 4 lines. So this is basically an example of a quatrain, which is a 4-line stanza borrowed from Persian poetry. So it is a 4-line stanza and it could be rhymed or not. And to add on, there is still one obvious element that is present in the poem. which is the rhetorical question. So rhetorical question, it is intended not to be answered, but to impose and make a clear point. So for example, is the line, I am nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too?
Yeah, and to add on what I have said early on, the other end rhyme is the word frog and the bug in the lines, how public like a frog to tell one's name, the life of June to an admiring bug. And also there is another element that I have observed, which is the meter. So the sound of the meter in I Am Nobody Who Are You is characteristic of Emily Dickinson's poetry more generally. So overall the poem is generally iambic. So it follows the unstressed, stressed, or the dumb syllable pattern. So that's for number two. Let's proceed to question number three. So here is question number three. How does a speaker use diction and figurative language in I Am Nobody, Who Are You to portray what it's like to be somebody, and how does this impact the meaning of the text?
The speaker does it by conveying that nobody can experience companionship rather than simply isolation. This gives us an image that the speaker has never met another nobody before, and she's certainly not sure how to act or respond to it.
Yes, indeed. And I want to add that one figurative language present in the poem is that it clearly used oxymoron. So oxymoron is a figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunctions. For example, the first two lines of the poem, I am nobody, who are you? Or are you nobody too? Here, nobody refers to the speaker that she does not want to be known. And also, in the first stanza, the speaker appears quietly delighted to have discovered someone else who is nobody. And in the second, she contrasts their joint good fortune with the tedium of being a brash, vulgar somebody.
Okay, so now, thank you so much, Kara and Lisa. Now let's proceed to question number four. So question number four, what is the tone of I Am Nobody, Who Are You?
So ultimately, Dickinson's short lyric can be read either as a straightforward celebration of nobodiness, of being that overlooked and underrated thing, which is the face in the crowd. But it also allows us for a more cunning satirical reading, whereby the poem is imagined to be a response to a question that has been left out of the poem. And we could conclude that the strength of this poem is that it can be analyzed either way, which is often the mark of a great poetry. So I agree with what Lisa have said. As what I have observed also as I have read the poem, the tone of the poem is mixed excitement and hushed. Excitement in the sense that she found herself a circle or someone which is a nobody like her, and hushed because the speaker doesn't want others to make fuss about it.
And lastly, I have detected that at first the speaker's tone is quite and sneaky. And in the second stanza, it becomes kind of pitying and lamenting. And that's what I have observed of the tone of the poem.
Yeah, there are a lot of words that we can associate to the tone, right? But generally, it's more on seriousness, the seriousness of the author, and also it is in a dark tone. Now let's proceed to the next questions. Question number 5. Why does the speaker of I Am Nobody think it would be dreary to be somebody? Why?
For me, based on the poem, the speaker then talks about how boring it would be to be a somebody. It would leave nothing private. The speaker likens being a somebody to being a frog. Somebody spend their time talking themselves up to anyone who will be giving them attention and admire them, comparable to frogs making their noises in a swamp.
So, in addition to what Louis said, to become somebody lives in search of attention and admiration. This is certainly the reason why why the author thinks it's dreary to be somebody. She also compared being somebody as public as a frog, which entails somebody who won't become a princess no matter how many kisses they get.
All right. So, guys, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to be somebody or to be nobody?
So, in my opinion, it is indeed dreary to be a somebody. There will be a lot of dramas, eyes and ears that follows you
Like, who
around.
do you prefer to be? Eh, do you want to be somebody, or is it preferable to just be a nobody?
It is preferable to be just a nobody. For being somebody also will always makes us to seek for the attention and admiration of others. For that's how it works. You will never be a somebody if you don't have an admiring physical psyche or you don't have a recognition for a great achievement.
So also for me, I would prefer to be a nobody because I could say that it is very depressing to be somebody who is seen on public, like to be somebody who everyone keeps an eye with. Like it is very lifeless to be somebody who's preferable to fame or public recognition when we know that it's very difficult to find companionship when you are in the public eye. So let's proceed to the next question. Identify the metaphors of the poem I Am Nobody, Who Are You by Dickinson. So for each metaphor, what is being compared to what? And what feeling or idea is being expressed by this comparison? So for me, the main metaphors in the poem I Am Nobody, Who Are You are the frog and the bug, which both convey the idea that fame and public admiration are ultimately worthless.
And as for me, and also the frog and a bug in the poem together represent the speaker's negative perspective of fame. The speaker claims she is happy to be nobody as opposed to being somebody.
Isa naman. Okay, thank you so much. Now, let's proceed to question number 7. So, as in many of her poems, Emily Dickinson conjures up unexpected surprise with the use of one little word, frog. By comparing the announcement or telling her name to the calls of a frog, what does the speaker infer to the value of it?
So the implication is that there is a freedom in being no one of importance, since one's behavior is not scrutinized by others. She then uses the image of a frog in a bog as a way of mocking those who seek fame.
And then the frogs loudly rebel and puff their bodies up when they do so. And through this image, Dickinson creates a metaphor for those who puff themselves up in public in order to draw attention to themselves.
So this frog is a public creature, which refers to the fact that frogs announce their presence. So these are symbolizes of famous peoples, right? Via loud croaks, while other frogs around them do the same thing.
As the frog acts as a metaphor for those who seek fame, so does the bug act as a metaphor for the public at large.
And in addition to the bug, the speaker describes the bug as admiring, which is a term often used to describe a celebrity's favorable public. However, by using the bug as a metaphoric image, Dickinson is suggesting the public's attention is not worth seeking.
And lastly, as we all perceived, a bug is generally perceived as humid, ugly place. One would also hardly seek the admiration of a bug, further framing both the fame seekers and the public that eats up their behavior as ridiculous.
All right, thank you so much for all of the inputs about the frog. So now let's proceed to the last question we have. So question number 8: what does the fame seem to consist of to the speaker?
So fame seems mainly to consist of telling one's name over and over, or like in the line, the livelong day.
The poem calls out to its readers to say that being humble, withdrawn, shy, or private is just fine. In fact, such a way of life has many virtues of its own. The poem is one of a number of Dickinson poems that questions the value of public admiration, something which eluded Dickinson in her own lifetime.
And based on my own conjectures, for Emily, fame is dreary because when you are a somebody, other people would make a fuzz, which the speaker implies is something the addressee already knows to be distracting and head use.
So now we're done with all the questions, and thank you so much for your thoughts and answers of the questions, guys. So now I would like to ask, what are your general takeaways regarding the poem?
For my major takeaway, the poem strives to say that it's okay to be withdrawn and that people aren't necessarily alone in feeling like they want to keep themselves to themselves. And it talks about the importance of anonymity and solitude and how it can be just as sweet as being around with people.
And for me, Dickinson, the author of the great poem, wrote a line that rings true for many adolescents. Like in the poem, she comments on the lack of identity in one's life. She encourages people to think about their own identity in order to find it, as well as we all know that people spend their whole lives trying to find themselves. And as this incredibly short poem shows, it can be difficult.
So, as we have read and analyzed the poem, so we have found out that there are two types of person present, right? The nobody and the somebody. So, in my own interpretation, the speaker sees herself as a nobody and assumes that the reader is the same as well. So, this is observed when she asked, "Are you nobody too?" And then eventually said, "Then there's a pair of us." So, the next line is very striking. For me, it talks about being silent as a nobody, that the speaker does not want anybody to know who she is for the reason that she might be criticized by the people around her. In the second stanza, she talks about the life of being famous, which she compares to being a frog because of the creature's natural tendency to create noise. She said that being one is so dreary, which means for her it is very undesirable. So the lesson here is that it's all about celebrating the simple and private life, which is very ironic in today's generation, right? Where people post publicly everything about them on social media, even the bits of things that happens around them, which is wrong. There is no need to let everyone know about what we have and what we do. We are not living to please people, we live for ourselves. So we should consider privacy most of the time. So the more private we approach life, the more happier and peaceful our life would be. So that's it, guys. Do you enjoy the discussion today, the sharing?
Yes, we really do enjoy.
Yes,
So have you
definitely.
enjoyed? So it's great to ponder the ideas and the thoughts that you have shared today. So thank you so much for all your efforts, for your presence today, and have a great day ahead.